Okay, good morning. So we are today doing Kavchet in Aleph. We are at the two dots, or we just did the two dots yesterday about Tfilas Ha'erev in Lakeva doesn't have set time. We said, what does it mean it doesn't have a set time? Does that mean that you have all night to do it? Then you would have said Tfilas Ha'erev to be called Laila. Why would you say in Lakeva? It was Mashma that was discussing whether or not it's Rishus or Rechav. We explained that Taisa says that Rishus here doesn't mean literally Rishus, that you have a choice if you want to have or not, but rather what means the ein lakeva, that there's machlokes with rishus or rechayva. Even rishus means that you should do it unless you have something competing, bar mitzvah, something that's important to take care of, which is averis. Otherwise, you have to daven ma'ariv. Where we are now is the single dot, right before the widest lines. Tana Rabbanan. Says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, Ma'aseh b'Talmud echad. There was a story with a student, Shabbat Rabbi Yeshua, that he came before Rabbi Yeshua. They asked him, "Is Meir Rishus or Rechayva?" As we just said, and as we see that this remains machlokes. But the student, is asking Rabbi Yeshua what the story is, and we'll see that there was a reason why to ask Rabbi Yeshua. So I'm like Rishus. Rabbi Yeshua said to him, "It's Rishus." So the student then came in front of Rabbi Gamliel. He asked him the same question. He said it's a chayv. So this student asked Rabbi Gamliel, but didn't Rabbi Yeshua tell me that this is the rishos? He said you should wait. Rabbi Gamliel says to this student, you should wait until the warriors are going to come in, the base have medrash, and then we'll deal with it. When the other rabbis, the other students, they came all into the yeshiva. The person who asked the question, the student asked again. What did he ask now? Tfilas arvis rishos chayva. Is ma'ar rishos chayva? Amalei Gamliel chayva. Gamliel jumps up and says it's a chayv. Amalei Rabbi Gamliel chachamim. Is there no one who disagrees with me about this matter? Amalei Rabbi Shua Lav. Rabbi Shua says no one disagrees with you on this matter. Amalei Valem Shimcha. I'm sorry, Amrulay Rishos. Don't we have it said over in your name that you yourself say that it's a Rishos? Amalay, and there's no response from Rabbi Yeshua. Amalay Yeshua, Amad al Raglecha, V'ya'idubach. He says, Yeshua, stand on your feet and let it be testified against you. Amad Rabbi Yeshua al Raglev, so he stands up. V'amar al Malay Anichai V'umeis. So Rabbi Yeshua says to himself, if I was alive and the person was saying about me that I say it's Rishus was dead, then I could disagree and say, no, I never said that. But since we're both alive, how am I going to disagree and say, no, I didn't say that? So Rabbi Gamliel kept on giving the drasha, and Rabbi Yeshua kept on standing. Until all the people started singing, meaning they got upset and they're murmuring and they tell the Maturgaman, they tell chutzpahs to stop transmitting over the shir that Rabbi Yeshua was saying. And he stopped. They said to themselves, how much are we going to give the room to Rabbi Gamliel to hurt Rabbi Yeshua. Rosh Hashanah is Shtaget Tzarek. If you remember last Rosh Hashanah, right? You remember the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah. Right, what did the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah tell us? That they had a machlokes between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua about the calendar. And Rabbi Gamliel held that it was so important that there not be two calendars among the Jewish people, that on the Yom Kippur, that was the Yom Kippur according to Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Gamliel made him go with his wallet and his walking stick and violate his Yom Kippur because he wanted to make sure that all of Klal Yisrael kept to one calendar. So Rosh Hashanah Shtaget Tzarek already made him trouble before in Rosh Hashanah. When it came to Rav Tzadok and the Gemara in Becheres, he already made him a problem. The Ma'aser over there by Rav Tzadok Zeb Tzaddik had a bachar that had a mum, and we always suspect when people doing this deliberately, and doing it deliberately in order to get out of, having to give away the animal. But Reb Tzaddik obviously didn't do it deliberately. He's Reb Tzaddik, he's very famous Reb Tzaddik, right? This is the famous Reb Tzaddik that when Rabbi Yochanan Zakir, right, is asking for three things, right? That the Yerushalayim should be not about they're going to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, but save Yavna, right? So one of the things he asked for was medicine Reb Tzaddik. Reb Tzaddik. Obviously, Reb Tzaddik didn't do anything terrible. Nevertheless, there was a disagreement about how you treat him between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. And over there also, Rabbi Gamliel said to Rabbi Yeshua, stand on your feet. And over there, it doesn't say that the people got angry and they made Rabbi Gamliel stop punishing him. So, but now it's already two times. Already two times Rabbi Gamliel has humiliated Rabbi Yeshua in public. So therefore, they said it's enough. They stopped Chutzpah Samatzogim for giving the shir, and they say, Hachanami Tzare, we're going to now let him keep on giving him Tzar. Tov v'navre, let's get rid of him. Let's demote him. Let's put him down. So before we go any further, I just wanted to point out, it's mashma here from this Gemara that how did they give the shir? That everyone is sitting. Everyone is sitting, and the punishment Rabbi Yeshua is that he's standing when everyone else is sitting. Because if everyone was standing, then what? Then obviously there would be no issue with this, right? If everyone was standing, he's just being treated like everyone else. That's not a big deal, correct? So the problem I have with this is a Gemara, Megillah Aleph, Chaf Aleph, I'm sorry. The Gemara Megillah Chaf Aleph, the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, Moshe, Moshe Ad Yeshua. I'm sorry. Moshe Ad Rabbi Gamliel. Lo hayu lemed entire ela me'umad. Mishemeis Rabbi Gamliel. Then Yard Chayli la'olam. Lo hayu lemed entire miyoshev. The Gemara there says that the whole way that they used to study Torah changed by Rabbi Gamliel. Now Rabbi Gamliel was alive. They all stood. And it was only when Rabbi Gamliel died that they started sitting when they learned. Now, you know that there's three Rabbi Gamliels that are mentioned in the Mishnayos, right? You have Rabbi Gamliel HaZaken, he's the first Rabbi Gamliel. He's the grandfather of this Rabbi Gamliel. You have Rabbi Gamliel number two, which is the Gamliel, but he's always referred to as Gamliel HaZaken, or I shouldn't say always, there's a debate. Most people think that he's generally referred to as Rabbi Gamliel HaZaken to differentiate him from the main Rabbi Gamliel, which is the Gamliel number two, which is the Gamliel D'Yavne, which is the famous Rabbi Gamliel that we have here. You have a third Gamliel, who we find as a student, is the son of Rabbi Yudan Nasi, is Rabbi Gamliel Barabi. Rabbi Gamliel is the son of Rabbi. He's Rabbi Gamliel number three. But it's usually when you just say Rabbi Gamliel number three, you say Rabbi Gamliel Barabi. Usually when you say Gamliel number one, you say Rabbi Gamliel HaZaken. When you say the regular Rabbi Gamliel, referring to Gamliel number two. So it's clear from that Gemara. There's some regular Gamliel number two. One who went to Yavne, the very famous Gamliel that we have all the things with, and I just don't understand that. How do you see that this is a punishment? At that time, everybody should understand it. But clearly, it was seen as a punishment. So how do you understand the Gemara Megillah? I leave that as a question. I don't have an answer to it. I don't see anyone ask the question. I think it's a fair question to ask. That's the number one. Number two, we had just said yesterday. We said Tfilas Erev Ein Lo Keva. We said what? We said that the Ma'ariv doesn't mean that you have all night. That's not what we're debating. Of course, everyone agrees you have all night. What we're debating was whether or not it's Rishus. And we see that this machlokes goes on long past Rabbi Gamliel Rabbi Yeshua. You think it was resolved over here? It's not resolved. Because we still see that depending on the Gersayos, it's Rav or Shmuel arguing it. It's Rabbi Yochanan. It's Abaye Rava. Like this machlokes is still going on in the times of the Amiram. If Ma'ariv is a Rishus or a Chayva. When Taisus is saying that the Amar who holds it to Rishus holds it to Rishus only in the fact that if you have another mitzvah to do, you're pater. Does that withstand the reading of this Gemara? Is Taisus the Pasham Shad in understanding this Gemara? If it was really, that's the debate between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. If you have another mitzvah, if you are able to pass over on Ma'ariv, Everybody agrees that if you have something else that's coming along, it's a mitzvah iveres, that you have to take care of, that you would be, in a sense, an einus, and you wouldn't have to daven. In what way is that different than any other tefillah where you have another mitzvah that you have to do, that we have just spent a whole bunch of time talking about? So the only thing is, maybe you would say that the machlokes is okay, but maybe for now you don't have the ability to do the mitzvah, but you have all night to do it, so you should do it later. I mean, that sounds like if that's the machlokes, I'm sure that the is getting so angry at Bishur, the way they're treating him, doesn't sound like this is the nature of the machlokes. If the debate is only if you have a mitzvah verse that you could push off ma'ariv or not daven it, sounds like a pretty weak argument. If you want to say that the fundamental machlokes is the third field of the day, an obligation, or is it just the rishus? I see it more, but it's hard to see that the way Taisus wants to learn rishus, that it's really a chayva. But if you have another mitzvah veris, then you have to take care of that. But that's where they're arguing. Now, Rabbi Gamliel said, no, you still have to, maybe you have to do the mitzvah veris. Of course, you would agree. You have to do the mitzvah veris, but you still have to daven ma'ariv later on. Okay. That doesn't seem to be such a strong debate. It seems this kind of a story with this kind of repercussions, that, well, as we're going to see, that they're going to now get rid of Rabbi Gamliel as the Nasi. It would seem to me need a little bit of a more fundamental. They say that the straw that broke the camel's back. Okay, so maybe say this is the straw because already was two mice before. So even our little thing, maybe, or maybe this is precisely it. In other words, the fact that on something so minor, that Rabbi Gamliel was willing to say to Rabbi Shua, you have to stand, which was a humiliation. And I should say he didn't say you have to stand. He said you have to stand. He never said you could sit back down. Right? He said stand and let them testify against you. He never said to sit. So Rabbi Shua, for the honor of the Nasi, didn't want to sit down without permission. And Rabbi Gamliel wasn't giving him the explicit permission to sit back down. Maybe this was considered so small, so therefore this is the straw that broke the camel's back. Either way, so says the Gemara now. So we're going to get rid of him. We're going to demote him from being the Nasi. So Tov and Na'abre, let's demote him. Man nukim le, who should we replace him with? Nukbil Rabbi Yeshua, if we're going to replace him with Rabbi Yeshua himself, Baal Maisu. He can't really do that. He's the guy, he's the protagonist of the antagonist in the story. That would be too much. Right? To bring him in now and as the head will be too much. Nukbil Rabbi Akiva, then maybe we should put in Rabbi Akiva. Dilma Anishleit less Skos Avis. Maybe they would punish him because Rabbi Akiva doesn't have Skos Avis. Rabbi Akiva was 40 years old before he started to learn. He doesn't have that kind of protectia, that kind of a family history that he'd be protected from the wrath of Rabbi Gamliel. Let's replace Rabbi Gamliel with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah because he's a wise person, he's wealthy, and he's a 10th generation from Ezra. Hu Chacham, the Makshel Mefarkli is a Chacham that if you ask him questions, he's able to answer. Vu Ashir, and he's wealthy. If they need him to go, sort of help pay off the governor to ransom essentially the Jewish people to get him out of a bind, he could do it. He could afford to do it. What's you, Ezra? And he is the 10th generation from Ezra. The Isla was Avis. Rabbi Gamliel is not going to be able to intimidate him or to punish him because he does have major Skosavis in the sense that he's the 10th generation from Ezra. They asked him, no, are you open to this job? Are you open to taking on the job, becoming the Reish Mesivta? The Reish Mesivta is the way they're referring to the Nasi. So I'm going to go ask my wife. So he went to go ask his wife. Now we're on the topic of Chavches. But before we get there, I want to mention a couple of things. One, there's a Rabbeinu Chananel. In my Gemara, the Rabbeinu Chananel appears on Chavtes. On Chavtes on the base. So I don't know about everybody else's, but that's where it is in mine. So Rabbeinu Chananel asks, what about Rabbi Elazar ben Horkinus? Right, the main protagonist, the battles of Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Elazar. But why not do Rabbi Elazar ben Horkinus? Why not him? So the Rabbeinu Chananel says, they couldn't do Rabbi Elazar ben Horkinus because in Neshai is Zakin Ma'id, because he was too old. And we learn in Sanhedrin, You can't put like two old people. They have no mercy. Right? They're mean because they're very old. They only care about themselves. So you're not allowed to put such a zaken muflag on the Sanhedrin. So Elazar ben Harkness was too old. I don't understand this Rabbeinu Chananel. My question is Rabbeinu Chananel. I don't think why the Gemara doesn't want to put in Elazar ben Harkness. That's a very Pashut answer. What's the Pashut answer? Anybody remember? What happened to Elazar ben Harkness? He was put into Nidui. Why was he put into Nidui? Because he got into a fight. With who? Rabbi Yeshua. What was the story? We had it in Bava Metzia. It's true. We didn't do Bava Metzia here. But we did the brachas. And what did we learn in brachas? We had a story. Remember back? Where was it? On Chav Beis. Was it Chav Beis? No. It was. The Gemara was. I am blanking now. Where it was? The Gemara was literally right here. We just had it. The Gemara was. No. I'm not remembering. Oh, I'm sorry. It was your test. The Gemara was your test on an Aleph, right? We said over about the Tanner Bachnoi. What was the story of the Tanner Bachnoi? Was that Rabbi Elazar ben Horkin is the Gemara says, I say Yem if you call Tara Shatir Blazer, meaning Rabbi Elazar ben Horkin, is the star from Lefanov. Everything Rabbi Elazar ben Horkin said was star, they burned in front of him, and then they blessed him. Blessing doesn't mean blessing. It's a Lashon Saginar. What do they do to Rabbi Elazar ben Horkin? They put him in Nidui. And he died in Nidui. He never came out. Literally. They were mater his Nidui when he passed away. They came to visit him on his deathbed, and the rabbis stood. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin, they stood a few amos away. Remember we talked about Dalet amos was the new Rishos? They stood more than 4 amos away from him. So I have a very simple answer whether Nasser Blood ben Horkin is. Because he was ostracized. So I leave it as a question on Rabbeinu Chananel. I don't understand. I don't understand what Rabbeinu Chananel's saying. I understand the Gemara why we don't mention him. I don't understand the Rabbeinu Chananel. That was one point. Second, it's amazing, right? Because this story must have happened before with Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel, and it was clear how that story ended, right? That story was a terrible story because one of the greatest rabbis of the Jewish people, Elazar ben Horkin, is no longer allowed to teach. He's no longer allowed to, be a part of the tradition. He's pushed out because of the fact that he was willing to take a position. That was what? Opposing the majority of the rabbis. Who's the one who punished him? Who's the one who punished him? Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua is the one who, in that famous Gemara in Bava Metzia, on the test, is the one who's saying, let's bring all the proofs there. But Elazar ben Horkin says, let the river flow backwards, let the tree be uprooted, let there be a bas chamanishma, and every one of those proofs, what does Rabbi Yeshua say? On Torah's Leib HaShemayim. And it's this very same Rabbi Yeshua who seemingly is willing to take his own position against the position of Rabbi Gamliel. I find it to be very fascinating. Why Rabbi Elazar takes his own position? Right? Because they're afraid if he's a Zakid Mamre, he's paskening, and then Rabbi Yeshua is willing to 100% punish Rabbi Elazar ben Horkin, but by himself, there's no problem taking his own position and paskening like it. Because someone asked him. It's not like he didn't pass on. He asked. He was asked, "What is the story with this Meir?" He was asked privately, and he said, maybe the answer would be there. Rabbi Yeshua would say, "No, I'm different than the story of Rabbi Elazar ben Horkin, because here in public, when I was asked, I said that the halacha was X. Privately, maybe I said something else, but in public, I was 100% willing to acquiesce. Maybe that would be a distinction. Otherwise, you have a question. Why is Rabbi Yeshua, when it comes to Elazar ben Horkin, is so vociferous about not allowing Elazar ben Horkin as a different position to sort of remain standing? Whereas, when it comes to his own position, he is willing to, potentially say it, at least privately. Lastly, the Gemara there in Bava Metzia concludes, is it that this story ended? It was a huge tragedy. Among the tragedy was in 2 parts. One was Rabbi Gamliel, and one was Rabbi Elazar ben Horkin. Rabbi Elazar ben Horkin, the tragedy was that he, for the remainder of his life, lived outside of the camp. He was not a part of the Beis Medrash. And the part 2 of the tragedy is Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel Did we mention? Oh, we mentioned it on Thursday night. The Gemara in the Zohar Chafam Abayz about Rabbi Gamliel's wife, Ima Shalom, right, who is also the sister of Elizabeth Horgan. So, I'm sorry, the sister of Rabbi Gamliel was Elizabeth Horgan's wife, Ima Shalom. So every day she would go in to his office, or Elizabeth Horgan when he was davening, and interrupt him between Shemana Esrei and Tachlan. And one day she didn't. She forgot. She thought it was Rosh Chodesh. It wasn't. So he ended up saying Tachlan, and she said, "Oh, you killed my brother." And that's in fact the case. Rabbi Gamliel passes away as a result of the fact that Elizabeth Harkness every day was davening with a tremendous amount of tsar and pain at the way he was treated. The one day when she would interrupt, make sure his Shemana didn't connect to his tachon, that he wouldn't have such massive kavana. One day she didn't, and ended up that it caused her own brother to pass away, which again is a kind of unbelievable testament, because this is another story about where the machlokes led to. That machlokes, and here we see where this machlokes will lead to. The last point I just want to mention is that he said, "I'm going to go ask my wife." So the Rabbeinu Eibshitz points out from here, the pasuk says in Paris Vayetze, that when Yaakov was going back to Eretz Yisrael after having been away now for many years, so the pasuk says Vayikra Rachel Leah Sada El Sinai. He called them out to the field. We had already before, if you remember, why did he call them out to the field? Why didn't he speak to them locally? Because there's Naim Lakaisel, right? That's what Rashi had said here earlier. So you see, he went to go talk to his wives before he took the journey. He went to go talk to his wives. The idea of taking advice from your wife is a requirement, says the Rabbeinu Eibshitz. Why is it a requirement? The Mark Subasam of Beis tells us that there's different requirements of Aina for different professions. Somebody who works in the camel industry is different than somebody who works in the ship industry, is different than somebody who's working locally, is different than a Talmud Chacham. Everybody has different Aina requirements. Says Rabbeinu Eibshitz, he has to go ask his wife because his whole life's about to change. Until now, as you see, we'll see he's an 18-year-old, sort of student. He's obviously a very impressive guy, but he's 18 years old. And as he's going to become the Nasi, he's going to have all these people banging at his door. He's going to have all this power. He's going to have to run around to all these places. It's going to change his ability to be Mekayim his own requirements. You want to be able to do so, and do so with the permission of your wife. The Gemara there in Ksubas tells us that there were those who would go Shlei Bershus Nashesayim, and the Gemara says they punished with their life for that. All right, here's the Gemara. She asks, so she says to him, top of Kavkas, you going to go take the job, and maybe they're going to pass over you, maybe meaning they're going to knock you down, demote you eventually. Why are they going to demote you? Because eventually they'll figure it out with Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel. There'll be a Rabbi Rosh Hashanah. Then Rabbi Gamliel is going to become the Nasi again, and they're going to throw you out. So he says to her a big lesson in life. It's good to at least use fancy things for even a short period of time, and tomorrow have it break, than not to have it at all. In other words, if somebody was going to give you an option of driving with a Rolls Royce, you could have the Rolls Royce for a whole day, but then you have to give it back. Would you say, no, I'm not going to use the Rolls Royce because I have to give it back? Say, I'll try it out for one day. Let me see how it works, even though I have to give it back. Maybe a big lesson in life here on this, life itself. All right, so continues the Gemara. Amarle, less l'chiurta. So it's a wife, she has a lot of smart comments, right? So he says, the first thing that she says, they're going to demote you. He says, all right, look, I'd rather deal with this even for the short period of time that I have the ability than not to have it at all. So then she says to them, okay, but they're not going to take you seriously because you haven't got any white hair. He was 18 years old. As far as Lenisa, there was a special miracle. Then he gets 18 white hairs. I could say this over in the Gemara says it's a nace. I could say it's a natural nace. He started having to worry about the position, and he got a lot of white hairs very quickly. He got very nervous. Yeah. Either way, whether it was a nace outside the tava or within the tava, either way, he gets a bunch of white hair. So this is how we had the line. If you remember, we had it earlier in Brachot on Amud Yomi, where Elizabeth Azar said, I was like 70 years old. He was not actually 70 years old, but now he looked like a 70-year-old. He got looking old because of the fact that he was concerned about how he was going to manage his position. So in fact, that's what happened. Rabbi Yeshua gets, his honor protected. They demote Rabbi Gamliel and they promote Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah to be the new Nasi. On that day, they got rid of the doorman. They got rid of the watchman, the one who was guarding who can come into the base medrash or not come into the base medrash. And they gave permission to all the students who wanted to learn. They had open door policy, open admissions. You want to learn? You're welcome. Come in. Because Gamliel would say no. Gamliel would announce, anybody who's not a Talmud that's worthy shouldn't come in. What does it mean? Your insides are like your outsides, meaning you're an appropriate kind of a person. You're the right kind of a person. Otherwise, we don't want people coming in who are not. You remember we had the Gemara before. We had the Gemara on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. The Gemara told us on the top of Yud Zayin, Bein Oiskin Lishma, Bein Oiskin Shaloi Lishma. We said there was a difference between Oiskin Lishma or Oiskin Shaloi Lishma. And we normally say that somebody who's going to learn Shaloi Lishma is good because Mitay Shaloi Lishma, Ba Lishma. We also had a Gemara. The Gemara said on there later on in Yud Zayin, the Gemara said Oiskin Shaloi Lishma, Nerech Le Shaloi Nivra. A person who learns Shaloi Lishma, it's better as if he wasn't even born. We said, it seems like a bit of a contradiction. So Taisus explained that depends on why you're learning. If you're learning Shaloi Lishma because you want honor, because you want to marry a rich girl, because you think it's a good good way for you in life to hide from the draft. I don't know, whatever the reasons might be. Okay, we say Mitar Shaloi Lishma Ba Lishma. But if you're learning the kanter, if the only reason why you learn is to be able to beat up on other people, to fight, then we say that it's better, never better that you didn't learn at all. So over here we're saying, Rabbi said, the open door policy is only for people Techi Kabari. Only if you already reached that place where you're a genuine person. If you're not, please don't come to the basement. When, on that day, Rabbi is no longer there, so it's no longer his admissions policy. Anyone's invited. So guess what? Turns out there were tons of people that wanted to come to the base medrash. There were tons of chairs that were added. How many chairs were added? Either was 400 or 700 chairs. Gamliel felt very bad. He felt terrible. He says, I prevented Torah from Klal Yisrael. People didn't learn who could have been otherwise learning. They showed him in a dream. They showed him in a dream a bunch of white jugs that were full of ash. In other words, that these are wasted time. These people are nothing special. They're better. They wouldn't come to the base marriage. But the truth is, this wasn't the case. This really wasn't the truth. The truth was that they were showing this in a dream in order to make him feel better. This is the day that they learned idiots. In other words, at this time when Rabbi Gamliel was demoted, Rabbi Yeshua was and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was promoted, and they opened up the base medrash. This is when they learned eduyos. Remember the Gemara we had yesterday, or 2 days ago now, from Zayin Amud Aleph, we said Bechirta, the choicest one, right, was what? Was idiots. Why? Because that was the day when people said over all the things, all the traditions that they had. Every time we say Bay Bayayim was at this stage, right, when they had Rabbi Gamliel out, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in, and all these new people came with all their traditions. That is when these all were decided. And there was no halacha. That was a question that they didn't get to a resolution on. Now, before we go any further, just to mention that there is a Gemara in Yuma. The Gemara in Yuma tells us, Ayin Beis, that Rava says that Kol Talmud Chacham Shein Tefik Kibari in a Talmud Chacham. We see a position that Rava holds, and any Talmud Chacham was not Tefik Kibari is not considered a Talmud Chacham. What is the Gemara telling us here? It sounds like the Gemara is telling us here that Shemayim doesn't agree. Shemayim is sending Rabbi Gamliel a message. Oh, don't waste a bunch of jugs full of ash. These people are nothing. But Velohi says the Gemara, it's not true. Just leave Tuvei Daite, just to make him feel better. But it wasn't really the case. The truth is, there's something. It's worthwhile for these people to come to learn. So, very interestingly, Rav is saying, sounds like very much like Rabbi Gamliel. And Min Shemayim, they don't agree. In other words, there is a fundamental dispute as to how when do we adjudicate somebody as being a real Talmud Chacham? Is it when his spam is so pure? Like for me, my mind's eye is a Rosh Arieli. There's nothing there. There's no interest in ever like going outside the Dalit Amis of what he does. No interest in power, no covet, nothing. Just learn. That's it. Is that it? Because you have a very few the list of people who can meet that is I don't want to say nobody, but a very few people that can hit that kind of a level. Everybody they have a game. Everybody's got a plan. Everybody wants to promote themselves to a certain degree. We can say like so. Nevertheless, it's clear min hashamayim. It's just l'tuvei daite. That's number one. Number two, I thought it's interesting to just mention that we see that Shemayim does this from time to time. We have a Gemara. Gemara tells us in Chulin Tzadi about Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, after Rav passed away, so Shmuel was now the big person in Bavel, and Shmuel was not did not have smicha. We don't call him Rav Shmuel, right? It was just plain Shmuel. The whole Gemara Matzia, Rabbi wanted to give him smicha, didn't work out. A whole long thing. Anyhow, Rabbi Yochanan didn't think that he had to deal with Shmuel in the same way he dealt with Rav. So he sent him a letter. He sent him without salutations. Like he said, "Hi Shmuel," not like, "Hey, the genius Shmuel, Rav Shmuel, the unbelievable." So Shmuel was offended. So the Gemara says that he wrote him back a whole list of calculations about like the stars, and he sent him a whole and he's a mathematician. And he sent him a whole thing about Trefus. Okay, whatever. He's a doctor. Everything that he said that was like he was not impressed. He was not blown away. Then he he sent him a letter where he realized, oh, he's the major Talmud Chacham. I should go meet him because he's like a Rebbe. He's like going to be a teacher of mine. So the Rabbi Yochanan, before he would do things, he would ask his students. He would ask his students, psukli psukecha, tell me what you're learning, and he would learn from that. So the Gemara says that he asked the student what he's learning, and he wrote, this kid said a pasuk in Shmuel Mace. They said, oh, Shmuel died, I'm not going to go to Bavel. And the Gemara there says, no, that wasn't the case. Shmuel was really very alive. He was doing well. But not to be Matriach Rabbi Yochanan, they have to go to Bavel, so they told him Shmuel Mace. That's why he opened it up. So you see, this is the kind of thing that heaven, sometimes sends hints that are not necessarily factually true, but maybe we should use it for the MS themes on Shabbos morning. Fine. Okay, moving on. Says the Gemara. So V'afar Gamliel, this is the most amazing line, I think, of this entire Gemara, is V'afar Gamliel, Gamliel was demoted, and what would you expect of a normal person if he was demoted? What would you expect? You expect you get to be upset. Gamliel did not miss one Seder. He was there the whole time. That shows you the biggest raya that Gamliel did not do it for himself. He did it for the covet of the Jewish people. He did it so the Jewish people shouldn't have two tires. He did it entirely selflessly. How do you know? You know when somebody's bashing the self. If you see that there's no reaction, so you see it was entirely selfless. It was not done for himself, for his own grandeur, for his own ego. And that's why he didn't miss one Seder. The Gemara's made, he did not miss one Seder. He was there the whole time. The Tanan, on that day, Yehuda Geramani lefnei bebeis hamedrash. Yehuda Geramani came into the beis hamedrash. Amaleh money love because he says, "I'm allowed to get married." Why? Because the pasuk says, "Lo yava amani ma'avi." Amaleh Gamliel Aser. Gamliel says, "No, you're a Geramani, you're not allowed." Aser ata love b'kol. Amaleh B'shua. Mutar ata love b'kol. Amaleh Gamliel. So Gamliel says, "The volik var never yava amani ma'avi kal Hashem." Doesn't the pasuk say very clearly that you're not allowed to have amani ma'avi coming in to get married? Amaleh B'shua. B'chi amani ma'avi coming in yeshvin. You think Amon and Moav are still around? Amon and Moav are not here. Kfar Ola Sanchev Malchasha Bilbos Kala Umais. Sanchev came along and did what they used to do in the olden days. They would take people from one place and move it to another place. Right? That's what Sanchev did with the northern tribes. Right? Malchus Israel. He took them all, moved them away. Why? Because that's where you control people. When they have a place, then they're able to remember the way history once was, and they'll rebel. You move the people to a new place, then they're not attached to the place. They don't have any memory of the place, and they will be subjugated. This has always been the nature of how to win battles. How this idea that Zanchev came along was Bilbul Kalumais is a very fundamental trope in halacha. This is, for example, why the Mishnah tells us in the Gemara tells us in Gemara tells us in Megillah Tess about Rav Shimon Gamliel says that you're allowed to have Megillah in Yevon, you're allowed to have the Sefer Torah in Yevonis. You can write a Sefer Torah totally in Greek and it says totally kosher Sefer Torah. But as the Rambam paskins, it's absolutely not true with Manazeh. Why? Because for Allah Sancherev of Bilbul Kala Umais, So the Greek, the Yavan that they had, is no longer Yavan. So therefore, we don't know what the right Yavan is. So these have practical ramifications of Allah. Any other for our purposes here, what's clear is that Sanchev has come along and is no longer Amain. So therefore, you don't say Lo Yavai Amaini anymore. Shneimar v'aser gevulos amin v'asidesem shoysese v'erid ka'aver yoshvim. In other words, the point is, as Rabbi Yeshua is telling Rabbi Gamliel, since Sanchev has come along and he removed the borders from all the different peoples, and so everybody has been moved around. So therefore, the whole parsha, Ruba parsha, just coming from whoever is around him, and you have no idea that the person's actually an Amaini. Doesn't the Navi tell us that eventually Hashem is going to return Ammon back? And they're already back. Doesn't it say that Hashem is going to return the Jews back? When the Jews are not back, so how can you say that the Ammons are back? They're not back. Miyad Tiru love it because they let Yehuda Ger Amani marry into the Jewish people, even though he was known as a Ger Amani, he was still allowed to marry, even though it says Le'av Amani. Since this is the case, in other words, that I have been demoted and they are clearly moving on without me, I'm going to go apologize to him. When he gets to the house, so the base of the Meshach, he says he sees the walls of the house that they're very black. He says, I see that you're a blacksmith, that you work with coal, that the walls of your house are very dark. Woe to the generation that you're the head of it. The imams don't understand that how much they have to work in order to be able to have a living while they're still learning. How they're surviving and how they're eating. He says, I insulted you. Please forgive me. He ignored him. Also, to do it for my father's house. So P.S. So he took the apology. Who's going to go tell the rabbis that that we have now gone back along, that we're never Rapper Hashmad? You forgive me? There was some laundryman who said, I'm going to do it. I'm not Zilna. They sent a message with this laundryman to the base medrash. The one who was wearing the clothing, meaning the garments of the Nasi, should wear the garments of the one who was not wearing the garments. Say to the one who was wearing the garments, take your garments off, and I'm going to wear them instead. Rabbi Kiva said to Rabbanan, close the gates. We're not going to let these servants of Rabbi Gamliel come along and bother the rabbis. So meaning they didn't accept the idea that Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Gamliel had gotten back along. Rabbi Shua says, I'm going to go myself and go convince everybody that in fact we're getting along. He went and knocked on the door. And he said the following: Mazah ben Mazah Yaza, the one who is the sprinkler, the son of the one who sprinkles, should sprinkle. And the one who is not a sprinkler, the son of a sprinkler, Yermel Mazah, should say to the one who does sprinkle, Ben Mazah, the one who sprinkles, your water is the water from a cave, and your ashes are burned. Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Shua, Nisbayasta. So Rabbi Kiva says to Rabbi Shua, you got feeling better. You've been relieved. You're now not angry anymore. We only do this for your honor. The next morning, they came along to try to figure out what are they going to do. What are we going to do with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? How are we going to manage this? To put him down, demote him. You're not supposed to knock down somebody once they went up. If they're going to do 1 week, and split the duties, then they're going to be asur lakniya. They're going to be jealous of one another. Rabbi Gamliel is going to get 3 Shabbos. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is going to get 1 Shabbos. So that's what they call a famous line. You see the Gemara Chagiga Gimel about whose Shabbos it was. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is it Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah or is it Rabbi Shua? And in that Gemara there was Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. But I say Talmud, and the Talmud who started up this whole entire question was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Tomorrow we'll have to deal with a bunch of other points in this Gemara.